Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in fact, Kritika, is holding this appraisal meeting at his residence as we speak. He is reviewing the performance of his Council of Ministers. This meeting comes at a time when the political circles are buzzing with news of a possible cabinet reshuffle. To discuss that, we are now joined by veteran journalist Shekhar Gupta and Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us here on What's On. Mr. Shekhar Gupta, let me start with you first. 2 days back, we had Ruchir Sharma on our channel, and he basically said that the economic policies of this government have been marked by incrementalism. So in that sense, there has been no radical departure from the past. Firstly, do you agree with that assessment? And secondly, are there ministers you think who have in their work been able to break from the past work that was done by the UPA ministers?
Well, I think in a sense, what Ruchir is saying is right. This is an incrementalist government. It's also a government that believes that not in less government, but believes that they can run the government better. And in some areas, they are running the government better. I think some of the reform is not conventional reform. For example, the auction of resources, which has been carried out quite neatly so far. And as yet, we don't have evidence of interference in the functioning of public sector banks, which has been a chronic problem in the past, although we don't quite know what will happen now, what are the consequences of Raghuram Rajan being sort of edged out. But yes, the government could have done a lot more. BJP did not nationalize the banks in India. And even if you read Ruchir's book, you see how much value nationalized banks are losing as private banks are building it. So I wish this government would at least say something minimum like every year they will privatize 2 of the weakest public sector banks, or even one such thing will electrify the markets, will electrify the news about India. But I don't believe this government is going to do that. This government, on the other hand, is diligent in certain areas and also decisive that the previous one wasn't. And you are seeing most of that action in infrastructure. You're seeing that in highways, ports. You've begun to see that in power and coal. And I think in the course of time, you might begin to see some of that in defense manufacturing as well. Although in terms of a percentage of GDP, that's very small.
Okay, Mr. Bhattacharya, let me come to you then. How significant is this review, keeping in mind the cabinet reshuffle that is around the corner? And I wanted to get your thoughts on an online survey that was done by mygov.in, talking about how people assess all the ministers and their performances. And on that list, Suresh Prabhu topped, followed by Sushma Swaraj, Nitin Gadkari and Piyush Goyal. Would you agree to that order?
My advice to all your channel viewers would be not to go by such polls, because these internet-based polls are very often not the right indicator of how a minister is doing and in what way is he actually adding value to his portfolio and his administration of the ministry. I think a better way of looking at the ministerial evaluation would be to see which minister has actually brought about the kind of transformative change in administration is necessary. Now, if you look at that, it is true that this government does believe in incremental reforms, but in terms of ridding the system of many of the ills of the past, I think you have seen a lot of action in the oil sector. You have seen a lot of progressive action on the power sector, although much more could have been done. So, and in roads, you have seen the revival of fine-tuned, reformed PPP projects. So, at least in the infrastructure sector, you have seen a lot of action, and therefore, the performance of all the ministers in these 3 areas, I would really rate them pretty highly. Add to that, there is something that nobody is actually taking credit for, is the manner in which the government has actually cleaned up its FDI policies, and it is still not what it ought to be, but at least on the retail sector, I think there are major movement forward for a government that was reluctant to bring about and liberalize changes in the retail investment sector. I think this government has taken major steps by, particularly in e-commerce and the food retail sector. I think these are the two sectors, and which is why, taken together with the labor policy reforms in the fixed tenure jobs and the Shop and Establishment Act model law, I think the retail package also needs to be seen in a context that the ministers have done quite well.
Mr. Bhattacharya, before I go back to Shekhar Gupta, I just want to quickly ask you another question because, you know, about 6-7 months after Suresh Prabhu had taken over the Railway Ministry portfolio, you were one of the first columnists to write about his stellar performance. You said that, you know, what was a welcome departure from the past is that he did not announce any new, new rail lines or rail tracks, and his focus was really on investments. A year since then, I mean, has he lived up to the initial expectations that he had created for you?
You know, I still stand by what I said. You know, railways is a long-term investment-led ministry, and I think given the situation railways was in when Mr. Prabhu took charge of that department, it direly needed huge extra doses of investments to kickstart the railway economy as such. Now, I think major decisions have been taken. Some investments have already begun fructifying, and you will not see any early result, but you will see some result maybe a year down the line. So I would say that you know, don't pass your judgment on the railway ministry yet, although I think there are a lot of changes that could have been brought about when the railway ministry is running and the railway is running. Decentralization of the railway function, they could have been speeded up. But on the investment side, there is no doubt that the major problem area of the railways have been tackled, and a lot of resources are being directed to creating capacities. You have the locomotive factory which is going to come up in two places in Bihar. So I think you need to talk about railways maybe a year or two down the line. Freight corridor project, the first trial run has already taken place.
Yeah.
That 180 kilometers of trial run has taken place without anybody's noticing it. So I think, you know, railway is a very low profile ministry. People only look at railway
there are
timing
reforms that have
and whether there is a fast...
Yeah, but Mr.
Sorry?
Gupta, there are some reforms that have happened. So, Mr. Gupta, let me come to you on that point. Who, according to you, would be the bottom performers right now, keeping in mind the upcoming cabinet reshuffle, and how, while the government is assessing the new cabinet, the reshuffle altogether, what would be the factors that will need to be considered in terms of fast-tracking reforms, in terms of bringing in foreign investment?
Well, first of all, nobody quite knows what Mr. Modi's priorities are, and even when the odd occasions when he's met people like us, he said that if anybody tells you when reshuffle will take place, what will it contain, who will move, who will come in, he's lying to you. So we don't quite know, frankly. But if you look at what brought Mr. Modi to power in 2014, he came to power on a promise of hope, that he will change all of India, he will fast-track many things, he will bring about reform, he will create jobs. Now, a lot of that has not happened. And if you look at his hope ministries, what are the hope ministries in today's government? They are ministries of health, they are ministries of education, they are ministry of agriculture, ministry of social justice and empowerment, ministry of science and technology. For most of these ministries, in fact, if I ask for a show of hands before a large audience, except HRD, nobody's even able to name the ministers. In fact, not even 5% people in a well-informed audience would know the name of our agriculture minister. So these are major areas of weakness in this government.
Right. Absolutely. In fact, Hope Ministry, that's a good nomenclature that you've introduced, Mr. Shekhar Gupta. Mr. Bhattacharya, you know, now tell us, I mean, stick your neck out and tell us, according to you, the underperforming ministers. If you were presiding over this exercise, who would be the ministers who would perhaps get a C- in the report card?
Well, you know, it's a very difficult exercise. You know, I normally look at the economic ministries more closely. And I entirely agree with Mr. Gupta that the so-called hope ministries actually have not done as well as they should have done. But if you look at the economic ministries, I personally feel is that the three critical ministries of oil, of power, and railways and road, I would expand it to 4. I think they have done reasonably well. Finance, given the fact that the third budget had actually managed to keep the fiscal discipline intact, and there are signs of some incipient recovery if you look at the last 1 quarter of performance. So I would say that these are the 5 or 6 ministries which have done, in a sense, managed the economy and the economic challenges under difficult circumstances without creating many major hiccups. Frankly, if you go beyond that, I would not be able to remember, for example, our trade ministry, and I think it requires a major reset in our trade ministry approach. Exports have been continuously doing badly. You might blame the external global situation being so bad, therefore the exports have been falling for 18 months consecutively. But it is also a fact that there has not been much of a progress in India's negotiations with global trading countries for getting into or logging the country into regional trading arrangements, and still continuing to rely on WTO as if that will bail us out in a new situation. So, instead of naming names, let us look at sectors which have been handled well, and there are sectors where more could have been done.
Okay, so Mr. Gupta, we won't name names and go into speculation, but Mr. Bhattacharya mentioned the finance ministry portfolio. How likely is it that we will see a change? Because I won't go into names again, but it's been widely talked about that there will be a change and a reshuffle as far as the finance minister's portfolio is concerned. How likely is it that there will be a change, and who could be the possible contenders? Mr. Gupta?
Well, if you're asking me, first of all, I will not speculate on any change. But the question I would raise is, who is a likely candidate? If there was to be a shift, I don't see anybody sitting in waiting to be the finance minister, not in this cabinet. I don't think there's any claimant for finance among the big 4 or big 5. And similarly, outside, it's not as if there is somebody waiting. And somebody who might be waiting is above 75 in any case, but that principle is established. But more importantly, so far Mr. Modi has shown us no inclination to get any talent from outside his ideological and political system. Because if he had shown that inclination, then you would have tried to speculate, and he could have brought so and so, so and so, so and so. So I don't think right now you see a candidate. If there's a change in the finance ministry, I would say it will be a very, very big surprise, and even bigger surprise will be whoever he brings in into that ministry, because I don't quite see that there is any reason to make a shift there. And I'll be very surprised if there is a shift in the top 5. I mean, these are the ministers and the Prime Minister who constitute the Cabinet Committee on Security, Home, Defense, Finance and External Affairs.
Mr. Shekhar Gupta and Mr. A.K. Bhattacharya, thank you so very much for joining us on What's Hot. We, of course, need to wait and watch whether this long-awaited cabinet reshuffle indeed happens or not, as speculated. We need to